Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really big story that's been developing fast. We're talking about BRICS, this global economic bloc. It's really shaking things up and causing some serious ripples, especially over in Washington. Yeah, so our mission today is pretty straightforward. I want to unpack the growing economic muscle of BRICS and look at why current U.S. President Donald Trump is hitting back with these proposed tariffs. Plus, what does it all mean for a major economy like India? And, for global trade overall. We'll get into the key numbers, the tensions, and really what's at stake here. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Maybe just a quick refresher. What exactly is BRICS? It started as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
That's right. The original 5, but it's been expanding quite rapidly, actually.
Right, it's bigger now.
Much bigger. It's almost doubled.
Yeah.
From those 5, it's now 10 members. We've seen Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, Indonesia, and the UAE all join the fold.
Wow, okay.
And this isn't just, adding names to a list. It really signals a major shift in global economic weight. Just look at the numbers. Back in 2009, the original BRICS nations, they held about 15.5% of global GDP.
15.5%, okay.
Fast forward to this year, 2024, that figure, it's jumped to over 26%, 26.3 to be precise.
So more than a quarter of the entire world's economy.
Exactly. Concentrated right there in those emerging economies. And it's not just GDP. Their slice of global trade has also grown dramatically. It went from around 13.6% in 2009 to over 20% by last year, 2023.
20%, so 1/5 of all global trade.
1/5. It's a huge shift in just, 14 years? Really shows how global commerce is being, rewired. And you see it in investment, too, foreign direct investment, FDI. Both money flowing out of BRICS countries and money flowing in.
How much are we talking there?
Well, outward FDI from BRICS countries, it went from about 8.3% of the global total in 2009 up to 14% last year. And inward FDI, so investment into BRICS, increased from 16% to 20% over that same time frame.
So they're becoming bigger players, both as investors and as destinations for investment.
Precisely. It's about shifting financial power. And looking ahead, by 2030, the projection is that this expanded bloc will represent nearly half the world's population.
Half the population.
Yeah. And their share of the global economy could climb close to 30%, maybe handling a quarter of all global trade. It's an undeniable economic force taking shape.
Okay, those numbers are frankly staggering. But beyond just the scale, what's really driving this momentum inside the bloc itself? Is there like an internal dynamic making them stronger together? Why is that so significant?
That's a great question. What's really driving it is a very deliberate push towards becoming more economically linked with each other, and crucially, trying to rely less on the U.S. dollar.
Ah, the de-dollarization angle.
Exactly. Take investment within BRICS. The amount of money invested between these member countries, it increased 6-fold just between 2010 and 2020.
6-fold. Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is, investing in each other.
They are. And the trade data tells a similar story, maybe even more dramatically. Trade within the BRICS group itself. It accelerated much faster than their trade with the rest of the world.
How much faster?
Okay, so between 2012 and 2023, BRICS trade with the world overall grew about 45.7%, which is decent.
Right.
But trade among BRICS members, that jumped 85.1% in the same period.
85%. Wow. That's almost double the rate of their global trade growth.
It is. And like I said, this isn't just happening by chance. It feels very much like a strategic pivot. And the core of that pivot, the thing that's really causing concern in Washington, is the increasing use of their own local currencies for this intra-BRICS trade.
Right. Moving away from the dollar for settling deals.
Yes. Look at China and Russia. Nearly 95% of their bilateral trade is now settled in yuan and rubles. 95%.
And that's up sharply, isn't it?
Very sharply. It was only about 21% back in 2021. So a massive shift in just a few years.
Okay. What about other members like India?
Similar trends. By November 2024, reports suggested around 90% of India-Russia trade was being done using local currencies or alternative arrangements. And then just this March 2025, China and Brazil announced their own deal to settle trade in their local currencies, too.
So it's becoming a pattern across the bloc.
It really is. And this isn't just about saving on currency conversion fees. It's a statement. It's about building financial independence.
So you're saying it's not just about convenience. It's more like trying to build their own financial plumbing separate from the U.S.-led system, economic autonomy.
I think that's a good way to put it. What's really fascinating and quite significant is how this growing economic power combined with this clear move towards local currency deals. It's being seen increasingly as a direct challenge.
A challenge to the whole post-war economic order dominated by the U.S.
Exactly. The order that's been in place for decades. It's not just about trade routes. It might be about fundamentally rebalancing global finance, moving towards a world with multiple power centers, where the dollar isn't the only game in town for international deals.
Right.
It's definitely a long-term play, but the direction seems pretty clear.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting then. How has current U.S. President Donald Trump reacted? Because like you said, this move away from the dollar must feel like a direct challenge to a pillar of U.S. economic strength.
You're absolutely right. He's reacted, well, quite directly and quite forcefully. For him, the dollar's dominance isn't just economic, it's tied to American power itself.
So any move away is seen as a threat.
Precisely. So on July 8th, just recently, he basically threatened all BRICS members with a blanket tariff.
A blanket tariff, just for being in BRICS.
Yes. He said, and this is a direct quote, anybody that's in BRICS is getting a 10% charge. If they are a member of BRICS, they are going to have to pay 10% tariff just for that one thing, and they won't be a member long.
Wow, okay, that's blunt. They won't be a member long. He's basically trying to break the bloc apart with economic pressure.
That seems to be the clear implication. It's not just about, say, protecting specific U.S. industries here. It seems directly linked to his view on the dollar's global role. He's openly accused the bloc of conspiring to dethrone the dollar.
How did the BRICS nations respond to that? They were actually meeting around the same time, weren't they?
They were. They had a summit in Rio de Janeiro ending on July 7th, 2025, the day before Trump's announcement. And they quickly condemned the proposed tariffs.
What did they say?
They called them illegal and basically said they were a threat to the stability of global trade. So you have a direct confrontation brewing. It really is like an economic chess match playing out right now.
Okay, so let's bring India into this picture more directly. India is a key BRICS member, but it also has really important economic ties with the U.S. Where does this leave them? They seem caught right in the middle.
They were in a very, very delicate spot, trying to balance these dual allegiances, you could say, and they're facing some specific tariff threats from Trump that could really hurt.
Like what specifically?
Okay, well, first there's copper. President Trump has announced a 50% import duty on copper, supposed to take effect by August 1st, 2025.
50% on copper. Is India a big copper exporter to the U.S.?
Not one of the absolute top ones, no. But the thing is, a tariff like that disrupts global supply chains completely. Everyone has to readjust. We already saw U.S. copper prices jump on the news, while prices elsewhere weakened. And shares of Indian copper companies actually dipped on July 9th, the day after the threat became widely known. So there are immediate ripples.
Okay, so copper is one thing. What else?
The really big one, what some are calling the potential gut punch for India, is a threatened 200% levy on pharmaceuticals.
200%. On medicines.
Yes. 200%. It hasn't been formally announced with all the details yet, but it's expected soon. The actual tariff likely wouldn't kick in for maybe 12 to 18 months, giving some time to adjust. But
still, 200%. India's pharma industry is huge, right? Especially generics going to the U.S.
Absolutely massive. It's a global leader. They exported nearly $9 billion worth of pharmaceuticals to the U.S. alone in the last fiscal year.
$9 billion.
Wow. So this poses a huge risk for their big pharma companies. You know, names like Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's, Cipla. These companies often get somewhere between 20 and 50% of their total revenue from the U.S. market.
So a 200% tariff could be devastating for them.
It could make their products prohibitively expensive in the U.S. It might even force them to think about moving manufacturing to the U.S. to get around the tariff. That's a massive, costly decision.
This is all happening while the U.S. and India are supposed to be negotiating a trade deal, right?
Yeah.
A big one they announced, but it seems stuck. What's the latest there?
That's another layer of complexity, yes. That bilateral trade deal. Remember back in February 2025, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, they had that handshake moment.
Right. They announced this ambitious goal.
Very ambitious. To double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. That's the target date, 2030.
But the talks haven't gone smoothly since then.
No, they've been pretty slow, bogged down in disagreements. India is resisting U.S. pressure to open up its agricultural markets further. Meanwhile, Trump's negotiators want India to lower duties on American cars and farm products. It's a bit of a standoff on key issues.
And now these tariff threats are hanging over everything.
Exactly. And just yesterday, July 8th, Trump apparently sent letters to 14 countries saying essentially we couldn't reach a deal. More such letters are expected.
So the big question for India is, will they manage to strike a deal? Or will they get one of those letters too, potentially facing that 10% BRICS tariff on top of everything else?
That's the million-dollar question, or maybe the billion-dollar question for India right now. You can really see the tightrope they're walking. On one side, BRICS offers strategic weight, diversified economic options, a platform to, balance global powers. They value that membership.
But on the other side?
On the other side, the U.S. is just critical for trade, for technology, for investment, strategic partnership, angering Trump with these tariffs looming. That could mean serious economic pain.
Especially for pharma and maybe other sectors.
Definitely. But then pulling back from BRICS isn't really an option either. That could weaken India's global standing, maybe even let China become more dominant within the bloc, which India doesn't want.
So what happens if there's no deal with the U.S.? What's the potential economic impact?
Well, some estimates are quite stark. Macquarie, for instance, suggested that if India faced an average tariff of around 26% from the U.S., it could shave about 50 basis points off India's GDP growth.
Half a percentage point of GDP. That's significant.
It's very significant for a growing economy. Other economists are warning about pressure on the rupee, potential hits to investment inflows. It's a high-stakes game with potentially painful consequences if they can't navigate it successfully.
Stepping back and looking at the bigger picture then, this feels like more than just trade disputes. It's like India is trying to find its place in a world where, as some people say, economic wars are the new normal. It sounds less like gentle diplomacy and more like a hardball strategic play.
I think that's a very accurate way to see it. This really underscores the strategic challenge India faces. It's a high-stakes game. They need to somehow land a trade deal with the U.S. that shields their key sectors like pharma, maybe autos, while offering just enough market access to satisfy Washington. That's tough negotiation number one.
Right.
But at the same time, they have to maintain and even strengthen their role within BRICS. Show they're committed, use it as leverage, but without, poking the bear in Washington too much.
And also managing the internal BRICS dynamic, particularly with China.
Exactly. Making sure they remain a key player, preventing China from becoming overly dominant within the group. It's multi-level chess. And when we talk about economic wars, that's really what this environment feels like. Nations using tariffs, sanctions, investment rules, trade deals, using economic tools as their primary weapons in geopolitical competition.
Less about tanks, more about tariffs.
In many ways, yes. It's about securing supply chains, protecting your home industries, asserting economic sovereignty in a world that feels, more fractured. India is trying to navigate this, trying to prove it can be a major player in both the old and the new economic structures.
Okay, so let's try to summarize the core tension we've really unpacked here. You have BRICS gaining a serious economic weight, becoming more internally cohesive, especially with this push towards local currencies.
Right, a rising force.
And that rise, particularly the currency aspect, has triggered a pretty forceful tariff-heavy response from current U.S. President Donald Trump. It's almost a textbook case of an established power reacting to an emerging one.
Absolutely. And that reaction throws into sharp relief the incredibly delicate balancing act for countries like India. They're caught right in the middle, trying to deepen ties within this rising BRICS group while also preserving absolutely vital trade and strategic links with the U.S. It's a real test of their diplomacy, their economic strategy, their agility, really. Every move matters.
So for you listening, the big question might be, what does all this maneuvering, this global chess match, actually mean for the future? Is this just a temporary spat, or are we seeing the ground rules of global trade and power fundamentally shift?
Well, it's impossible to know for sure, but I think the dynamics we're seeing between the established players like the U.S. and these emerging blocs like BRICS, it could signal something more profound. It might not just be about changing who trades what with whom. It could actually be about redefining the very architecture of global finance.
Awesome.
We could be entering an era with multiple competing economic centers of gravity. A world where the rules of international trade and finance aren't just written in Washington, but are influenced or perhaps even co-written by capitals in Asia, South America, Africa.
A truly multipolar financial world.
Potentially. Yeah. The move away from dollar dominance, the rise of alternative payment systems, the focus on regional blocs. It all points towards a possible fundamental reshaping of how the global economy works. Not just shifting trade routes, but shifting the underlying financial structures themselves. It's definitely something to watch closely.
A fascinating and potentially transformative period ahead. Thank you for breaking that all down for us. And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some fresh perspective on these really complex, really important global shifts.
Before we go, just a reminder. Please note, we are not SEBI-registered financial advisors. If you're considering making any investment decisions, please consult a certified financial advisor.